Okay, good morning again, everyone. Thank you for coming back. That I didn't scare too many people away during the break. That's good. And now you're all refreshed. So let's go into the second presentation, which is on diversity inclusion. How many of you have heard the term DEAM, D-E-A-M? Disability Employment Awareness Month. It's a federally initiative celebrated initiation celebrated in the States since 1945. They designate October in the United States as the DEAM month. And here in Alberta and Saskatchewan, we had also proclaimed that October is the DEAM month, which is to promote the awareness, the public awareness of disability, people with barriers to find employment, and also for employers and the rest of society to provide supports and to keep an open mind about the situation. Because Canadian employers have also realized that in our workforce, that if we exclude people with disability in our employment, we're actually excluding about 17% of the workforce. But disability is only one aspect of diversity. And so let me ask you a hard question. What kind of diversity do you see in your staff or the clients that you serve? Nationalities, ethnic backgrounds, yeah. What else do you see? Sorry? Financial, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, what else? Age, personality, yeah. Gender, sexual orientation, marital status, right? Education backgrounds, religious, culture, all of these good stuff. What about the challenges that your organization has been facing? If you're facing any challenges because of diversity? Language barriers, that's a good one. Yeah, what else? Technology, the ability to use different technology and get up to speed on learning technology. That's excellent. And on a scale between 1 and 5, this one I'm not saying 1 and 10, 1 and 5. How would you rate your organization's diversity inclusion practices? So, show me the fingers. Okay, thank you. So anywhere between no fingers at all to 4. That's pretty good. Was there any 5 that I missed? Oh, 5, great. Yeah, thank you. That's very good. So exactly similar to what I had experienced with other presentations, the organizations range anywhere between very little involvement to diversity inclusion to very high involvement, fully integrated. So what truly is diversity? So this chart is just my own explanation of it. It covers all of these protected grounds under the human rights legislation, but those are the visible, more visible diversity. They're also the non-visible diversity, right? So the way of thinking, the way of working, the experience, the education, and the behaviors. And again, dress code. No common sense anymore. It could also be a way of diversity. And I always use myself as an example that I have the visible traits of my diversity. I also have the non-visible traits of diversity in myself, such as I'm married into a very mixed family, and I have an entrepreneurial background on top of a regular career path. And I like to think that I think a little bit differently. So these are non-visible. When you hire me, maybe when you interview me, maybe you can tell a little bit, but not so much until you really get to work with me and get to know me. And how do we manage all of these differences, right? When I talk to managers, they often tell me, I'm afraid of it because they're from employees or clients are from different cultural backgrounds. I just don't know what I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong thing to offend anybody. So that fear actually turned into, I don't want to do it because I don't know what I don't know. Let's just hope that business is as usual. But my point back to them is that business is not as usual. Even if your staff members are not that diverse, your clients are also very diverse. Depends on where the locations are, but generally in Canada, we're very diverse, the demographics, right? And also, in my opinion, that managing diversity is actually managing about the similarities. It's properly managing employees. Because regardless where we're from, regardless of our differences, visible or non-visible, there are certain things we expect to gain from the workplace. A decent pay, a good culture, the challenge, a good supervisor, a good environment, all these things, that factors we've talked about in our first presentation. Regardless of our backgrounds, regardless of the diversity, we are expecting or hoping to have these things. So with that being said, managing diversity is about managing employees properly. So the agenda for this presentation, first let's talk about the definition for diversity inclusion very quickly and explain why diversity is a fact, it's not just a trend, and also understand the impact that diversity has on a given organization. 6 steps to attract, retain, motivate a diverse workforce, and leave some time for Q&A, and then we'll jump into lunch. I hope that sounds good. Great. So the diversity definition is it's a state or fact of being different. So diversity itself is about being different. And diversity inclusion, on the other hand, it's an organizational effort and process and practice. So the end result is to make our employees and customers and clients feel valued, respected, so they can be producing at their productive states. Diversity is the mix. Inclusion is to get the mix working well together. So I really like data and trends and research. So this chart actually shows us that 5 years ago, the Gen Y, or sometimes we call it millennials, is at about 24% here in Canada in the workforce. In just 2 years, 50% of the workforce is actually going to be occupied by the younger generation, the Gen Ys and millennials. A huge change in just 7 years' time, right? And this chart, Canada's visible minority population, shows us that in 2016, every 1 in 5 people that you bump into on the street was a visible minority. In 2035, that every 1 in 3 people you bump into on the streets is a visible minority. So the trend is constantly changing. Oops. Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you, Jeff. Okay, so let me repeat before Jeff came in to become our IT help desk. In 2016, every 1 in 5 people you bump into on the street was a visible minority. In 20 years, so 2035, you actually will see every 1 in 3, if not more, that people we bump into on the street is a visible minority. So the trend is constantly quickly changing. And this chart is showing you that in 2013, so now you can see that in Canada, the major source of population growth comes from immigration. And in 30 years, immigration will become the sole source of population growth. So what does all of these trends tell us? That diversity is not a trendy thing, it's not a good practice, it's not that something that we catch, it's not something that it's good to do when we have time as an organization. If the organization has now started with diversity inclusion practices, it's actually a matter of catching up because it's a fact. It's not a trend anymore. It's all around us. The employees that we hire, the volunteers that we recruit, the clients, the customers we serve, the students that we help, right? So all of these people are very diverse. There is also a bottom line impact when it comes to including people from diverse backgrounds. This is a research from a recent US research from 506 companies that with diversity inclusion practices in their organizations, the company actually seeing higher employee engagements. 19% increase in the operating income and 28% growth in earnings per share. And diverse workforce actually enhances customer loyalty. Some people are like, why and how? But actually, because the customers we serve are also diverse, so if you operate a bank business, that your customers come from all kinds of ethnic backgrounds, speak all kinds of languages, if you have staff members who are from a similar cultural background who can understand that language, it's making the banking effort very easy. So they become your repeating customer, they become your loyal customer, and they come back. And then also engaged employees are more productive. We all know diversity inclusion is about being valued, being respected. And when we are being valued and respected, we're actually more engaged. And more engaged people are more productive. And then also that diverse work teams properly managed and trained actually produce results that were six times higher than homogeneous teams. So this is based on the research that from 506 companies in the United States, that diversity does have an impact on the results on the bottom line of the organization. So what's my point, where I'm taking you to? And as the topic of the presentation suggests, this is to talk about 6 steps to attract, motivate, and retain a diverse workforce. I really thought through many things how I can make this presentation work effectively. And me like to think I think a little bit differently. I thought instead of having a traditional presentation with just research the best practices for you to follow when you go home, you can implement in your organization hoping it's going to work. I'm not going to do that. So what I will do is to share a real case, a real situation where I helped an organization build a diverse inclusion practice and how we reap the benefits out of it. As an example, to go through the 6 steps that we took. So even years after, I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to be part of the organization that I was with. It's in the industry of hospitality here in Alberta. The organization had about 600 part-timers, so full-time equivalent about 200-ish. Very, very diverse. So we had age group anywhere between 16 to 72 years old. People with abilities, disabilities, anywhere from the physical, visible disabilities to the mental, non-visible disabilities. We had people from more than 20 countries speak just as many languages and accents in the workplace. And gender, of course, and also education is also very diverse. We have people who work in the frontline positions with high school diploma or university diploma education, to people with a PhD graduates working in our senior higher level positions. So all of those impose challenges in the workplace. So when I first joined the organization as part of the HR person and meet and greet with leaders and managers, I designated my time on the calendar as part of my orientation process, onboarding process, to meet and greet with all the line managers and leaders. And after the quick introduction, shaking hands, smiled and say, how can I help? What are your issues? The line managers, roughly told me that they had a high turnover issue, number 1. Number 2 is they put so much effort and dollars into recruitment, but the results was not great. They didn't receive as many qualified resumes as they had hoped for, despite the efforts and money they put into. And the people they do hire, they leave pretty quick. And also within the workforce, we had extreme of people who stay with us for 20, 30 years until they retire, but that number is diminishing. We had more younger people leaving us very quickly after they joined the organization. So 2 questions, high turnover and recruitment effort was not effective. So what I did, so I talked to the leaders and managers, each one of them, and I said, okay, so let's do a deep dive into workforce. Let's analyze what kind of workers you have and what kind of issues you have. So we looked at the backgrounds, the tenure of all the current employees in those departments, did an Excel, did analysis, and then also we looked at the satisfaction surveys that we sent out every year, looked at the results, narrowed them down by departments, and look at the patterns of the comments and suggestions and feedback. I've also done a few focus groups with a few peer leaders, asking them or talking to people by the water cooler, really getting a sense of what's going on here in the workplace. And the comments I heard on the streets was employees, especially the people whose first language is not English, they felt they were mistreated. And I asked how and why. And they're like, managers often yell at us, and we felt not being respected. Then I talked to other workers in the workplace, and the younger ones were saying that older ones don't respect them. They felt like they were being pushed, they were being dictated, and their ideas are not being implemented. So I brought those firsthand information back to the managers and heard their side of the story. They're like, no, we weren't yelling at employees. What are you talking about? Then I gave them a couple of real scenarios I heard from the employees. And the managers were like, oh, now I know what you're talking about. It's the people whose English is not their first language. We employ lots of newcomers into Canada as our employees. Their English understanding was not there. So when they were not understanding instruction with minimum training, the managers just thought if I say it louder, they would understand it. And it was interpreted by the employee as the managers were yelling at them. So apparently there is a communication gap as well as the training that needs to be implemented for both the managers as well as the workers. And with the younger workers, we also did something crazy. So what I suggested is the younger workers saying they are not respected by the older workers. The older workers told us they don't want to work with younger ones because their values are drastically different. So we actually paired them up. We paired in a group equal number of older workers with equal number of younger workers. So the first 2 weeks, my office were bombarded with complaints, tears, angers. And then shortly after that, it died down a little bit. They actually started saying, they realized that we don't have a choice but to work together. You know, this is our job. Otherwise, we find some other jobs. And then a few weeks passed by, they actually started appreciating each other, the differences. Because when they were forced to work together, they had no choice but communicating why you're doing things this way, why I'm telling you to do things this way. So at the end, we actually reaped the benefits of the older and younger workers working together. They become buddies. The younger ones were teaching the older ones how to use computers, not just with 2 fingers, but swipe or type really fast, and social media. And the older workers were also sharing safety experiences with the younger ones not to cut corners. With our ESL, the newcomers, the ESL workers, so what we did was having volunteer employees to help with interpreting a few sentences in the workplace, changing our instructions from words to signages to pictures. And also we had trained the newcomers with just a few critical sentences, instructions, correcting their pronunciations, having them memorize these sentences. So we really simplified instructions to just using as fewer sentences as possible. And now when they learn the code, they know what these sentences really mean to them, what they're supposed to do. At the same time, we're also giving our managers instructions to be more patient, to speak a little bit softer, and just to learn a little bit more about the culture. And when we implemented the things softly, slowly, I was basically asking questions. So we did the workforce analysis and planning. We know what our workforce is like. We know what our employees are asking for. What do you want to achieve? And so what we also addressed was recruitment effort, right? Remember, I was saying that our recruitment effort and dollars were not producing the results we wanted to see. So we also did some research and looked at what's the trend. So the trend actually suggesting to us that we need to target our effort into the Asian and European markets. So we're in a major city in Alberta, right? And we were having a hard time attracting from just the talent pool close by. So we widened our talent pool selection a little bit and looked at what's the trend. So we really put our recruitment advertisement effort into attracting those 2 top communities that are popular surrounding our organization. And then we translated our posting into different languages, put pictures, used the social media, as well as used video clips to really tap into the different age groups, different culture groups, whatever that worked in those communities. Went a little bit crazy. We also looked into the Aboriginal groups hiring, and also we looked into alternative source of hiring. Use younger workers, part-timers, students, building relationships with the schools, colleges, universities. How can we offer your students work experience while they gaining experience, we get our work done? And also offering flexible work hours, hiring disabled people, and virtual workers, contractors. The next step we took was to want to build that relationship in the workplace, because the workers were telling us they were being yelled at, they were not being respected, they feel their values are very different. So then I took that message as we need to build that relationship. At the end of the day, managing diversity is about managing the similarities. It's about managing the employees' expectations. It's no different than when we manage employees in the past. So it's important in an organization we look at our leaders. What visions do you have as an organization? Can we put diversity and inclusion as part of your strategic plan? We all know when the leaders walk the talk, when the leaders take diversity and inclusion seriously, the managers will, then the other employees will. So that's what we started, start with the leaders. Built a business case, presented the data and trends to the leaders saying, this is where we need to target our effort towards. Can we have your commitments? Then we built policies with leader signature, and leaders started walking around the organization, talking to individuals, understanding their needs, understanding their differences. We had our leaders serving breakfast at our social events, handing out plates and pancakes. We had our leaders initiating blood donation drives close by to our organization. So all employees participate together, and we have jokes, and we did river valley cleaning all together, all of these things. So people get to know each other, and then they feel like, oh, they're not too strange anymore. It's actually really nice to talk to each other. And also we talk to our managers. So leaders now are fully engaged. We also got our board on board. It's also important to get those. And also we use the same language, keep consistency when we speak to the clients, speak to the public, that we are committed now. We have policy in place, we're committed to serving a diverse community. And we talk to our managers saying that, managers, it's really about managing the similarities, about managing employees properly. So managers, let's simplify your job as well. Don't yell, don't dictate. Let's see what you can do. Managers act like managers, because we all know people leave, 75% of people leave because of their direct managers. So managers, their job's simple: provide support, give feedback, say thank you, and remove the roadblock, even if the roadblock is themselves. Not let ego into the way, right? And also, so having that dialogue and having our managers, so funny. So our managers started learning a few words, saying hello and goodbye in different languages to the diverse group of employees they work with. And that made such a huge difference, because employees feel that I'm not serving you anymore, that I'm being treated, I'm being valued, you pay effort, you pay attention to us. We also started having a few family events in the summers and Christmas time, and had families and kids come into the workplace and join us at different events and volunteers together. Then the managers and leaders get to meet with the families too. So it's really building that relationship, that bond into a workplace. We had also put in place suggestion box. Everybody is welcome to put in suggestions. At the beginning, I received thousands of complaints, thousands of suggestions. At the beginning, it was really busy. And same as everything else, that it dies down. And at the end, people start suggesting, let's have orange instead of apple as our treat for the next brown bag lunch. So then by that point, I knew that efforts were actually in the right place, because all these suggestions were dealt with properly at the beginning. And each month, we switch the topic, the main theme of our suggestion box. So the first couple of months, our target was really at how can we help in the workplace remove barriers? Then it became, how can we include you? How can we engage you more so that you feel valued? All of these things, the themes that we took out from our engagement surveys, from our focus groups, we simplify them, and then we target the suggestion box based on the themes that we receive from the employees. We also celebrate diversity. So in each department, this is optional, it's not mandatory. So in each department, we would host cultural celebrations. If this is the Chinese New Year, for example, or if this is the whatever festival that the employees may have for their culture, they're welcome to dress in their cultural costume except the time they have to serve the customers, of course. And also they are welcome to bring the food that they eat and drink from their home countries, and also tell us a bit more about where they're from and their stories. So with sharing stories, we get to know each other, and that actually help us build our relationship. And then what's also really important, what we had addressed in our previous presentation, is the professional development opportunities. Every employee, regardless of the diversity, have the same access to the professional development opportunities. So we show them that the people from diverse backgrounds could also be promoted, could also take on a bigger challenge, could lead a team, could go to all these trainings that we have offered to everyone. And then encourage social bonds. We had lots of activities in our workplace. I also initiated ladies' night outs once in a month. It was very popular. And also we did a cleaning together, we did volunteer, we did building houses together, we're training together, right? And formally and informally, we get to know each other. So again, that diversity became similarities, became now I know you. It's not that difficult anymore. And of course, we want to make sure that we can measure it, because we know what gets measured gets done, right, in the workplace. So remember we presented a business case to the senior leaders, the CEOs, the VPs. They agreed, signed off on a policy. We implement those policies, communicated programs, changed all of these nuances in the workplace. And then let's now measure our efforts. Is it really working? The most obvious way to measure it is to observe. Simply seeing if people have organic relationship formed outside of business hours. I mean, during the business hours, it's very simple, right? We have to work together, we have to work together. But outside of work hours, do people go for happy hours together? Do they have family, neighbors inviting events and lunch and dinner together and enjoy having a few colleagues over as well? Do people know their colleagues outside of work too? And again, all of these were optional, right? So we're not pushing it because people have privacy, their preferences. We're just observing it organically. We're also observing in the workplace how effective are teams working together. Are they willingly to help each other, or are they pushing each other to the edge so I can win? We also changed our reward structure, so it's more team-focused instead of individual-focused. And then we also measure it concretely. So with retention rates, because managers were telling me when I first started, the turnover was high. So after 6 months, we implemented policies and our procedures. Let's take a look at the analysis. Are there changes? And then a year after, and so on, and goes forward, and so on and so forth. Also, we took seriously the annual employee satisfaction survey, look at their comments and results. Is they're trending differently than the previous years since we've implemented the changes. The exit interviews, I was so happy that I didn't have to do as many exit interviews as I first joined the organization. And the comments I heard from the exit interviews were different from when I first joined the organization. So I was glad to see that as well. But hopefully, in your organization, when you implement the changes, you don't have to do too many exit interviews because it's very ad hoc. We rather do a stay interview than an exit interview. A fewer grievances was unionized environments, and also we did more focus groups with randomly selected employees in the workforce and to tell us how they feel, what their barriers, challenges are, and are they more engaged now than before. So we did many different ways, silently using surveys, suggestion box, and more visibly, personally using focus groups, one-on-ones, and monitoring, observe, and seeing our retention results. So at the end, we believe what gets measured gets done. So now we have lots of time this time. So it's group work time. And as I mentioned, the first presentation, the first case was rather simple. This one is a little bit more difficult. So I would like you to take out the casework in your handouts. All right, so this is a case that I produced on my own. So the organization was established in 1985 with 3 offices throughout Alberta. The Caring Group is a nonprofit organization who strives to serve the newcomers, refugees, and the general communities. In the 2000s, the organization won several awards for being a pioneer of developing innovative community programs and being a responsible corporate citizen. The organization currently has 50 staff and 4 program areas, and there is an organization chart there. So the workforce analysis shows that in the past 7 to 8 years, the executive director realized the group workforce has changed. Gender, 80% female, 20% male, age group, very diverse, retirement planning. So this is also part of the workforce analysis that 2 critical managers will retire in just 2 years. And then family status is also different, and other information that a lot of the employees are newcomers themselves. So the ED has realized that due to the lack of diverse inclusion practices, the organization struggles with retaining the workers. Additionally, the group found it's difficult to attract younger and more diverse talent to serve its clients. So your task at your table, what are the 3 programs or new ways of doing things that you would suggest the Caring Group started doing? And what challenges would the Caring Group start experiencing with implementing your suggestions? Please do keep in mind that this is a nonprofit organization, that budgets, resources is always a challenge for them when you think about the suggestions. So let's do 15 minutes. Suggestions of using technology in the room, right? How the brains work differently from different people and different genders and backgrounds. Yeah, that's very interesting. So I would like to hear your response on this case study. I hope it wasn't too hard. A good brain teaser for the morning? Yeah? Okay, any volunteers? What would be a couple of things you suggest for the Caring Group? Go ahead.
So one of our suggestions was flexible benefit package, if you want to call it.
Okay.
I don't know what their benefits would be.
Right.
But to come up with some flexibility within a benefit structure.
Okay.
Like personal spending and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, like personal spending.
Okay, so the personal spending account, do you mean the wellness account or the healthcare spending account? Both. Oh, okay, excellent.
What's important to somebody at 50?
Yeah.
Compared to someone at 20?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we also call it wellness.
You're right.
That's why you're both working in those plans.
And just out of curiosity, by show of hands in this room, how many organizations do currently offer flexible benefits package? Just one. What do you got at the chamber?
We have like our regular healthcare, and then we also have the spending plus, the cost plus for benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could have your 80% of your dental or whatever,
Right.
or you could get up to a certain amount that you could spend on any
I see.
healthcare issues.
Yeah. That's perfect. So the trends actually to attract and retain, and we'll go back to the first presentation topic as well, of a more diverse workforce is definitely the flexible benefits package. So in Alberta, it's gaining its popularity with we call it Flex Plan for short, right? So the Flex Plan, we're basically offering employees the option to choose based on your life needs. Some organizations have a pre-built package. Which means that as an employee, I just choose from your option 1, 2, or 3. If option 1 fits my lifestyle needs a little better, I'll go with option 1. And I have a X dollar amount or percentage of dollar amount allocated to my benefits per year. If I have a big family, lots of dependents, I may choose option 3, which means that the dollar I get from my organization may not cover it all of my benefits. I pay a little bit extra through the payroll deduction. So that's one way of looking at it. These are pre-built packages. Another way of looking at it is just really flexible. So we offer employees a percentage or dollar amounts every year that you allocate into benefits options. It's no different than purchasing things on Amazon or eBay. You check which one you want to buy for how much price. And then the difference, if there is any difference, you pay the difference. If there is any left over, you get the leftover. Either you can allocate the leftover into other benefits options, or you take it out in cash, except you pay income tax on it. So this is definitely gaining its popularity. And a lot of younger people or more diverse workforce appreciates it because it really suits their needs. Different family situations, different lifestyles needs. The healthcare spending account can be used as a standalone benefits package. Some nonprofit organizations may not have deep dollars, so what they do is they just allocate, let's say, $500 every year per full-time permanent employee used towards healthcare-related bills. However way you want. If you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. And no offering of any other traditional health, dental, vision, that kind of stuff. The more popular organizations or the larger organizations that have a little bit more dollar, they also add a personal spending account on top of it, which is typically a couple $100s per year, use it or lose it scenario. And you use it for sports or wellness or green initiatives related. So I can purchase a bus pass every month and get reimbursed through this $200 gift to me from the personal spending account. I can also buy Lululemon clothes, for example, claiming I'm going to yoga class. Or I can truly go into a gym and get my gym passes reimbursed through the personal spending account. So it's really supporting a lifestyle. And let's not forget, on top of that, what's also very popular is what we call the EFAP program. And it's very cheap to implement and cheap to offer to our employees. So the Employee Family Assistance Program. How many organizations are currently offering that? Almost everybody. That's great. It's really, the return on investments is about 5 times the investment that you spent on implementing this in the workplace. And the cost per employee for an organization to pay is minimal per month. But the employee at least have an option to get resources for help if they need. So anywhere between financial, I am in a financial crisis situation, I just need some counseling, some support. I am in a marriage or relationship crisis, I need some support, someone to talk to. I would like to get some career advice. Not, I can't get along with my manager, but more, I want to know what are my career options. I'm a little bit unsure, I'm lost. I want to do some psychological tests, surveys, just want to know my options. They offer that. They also offer group counseling. If there's a traumatic event happened in the workplace, like what happened 2015 in Fort Mac with the fire. So organizations brought the EFAP counselor on site to, after the traumatic event happened, to consult employees about situations so they get help. And EFAP, you can use it, employees can use it online, they can go in person to see the counselor, or just day-to-day life issues that bother them, they can see counselor in person, over the phone, online, text messages, or if a situation is now too worrisome, they can get resources mailed to their home or email address as well. So those are definitely great suggestions. Long way to explain the answer, but it's a great way to look at workforce. How can we make the caring group scenario work better? What will be other suggestions that you have?
Succession planning?
Okay, great. Succession planning. How so? How do you mean?
It looks like you're. It looks like program managers will gone in 2 years. So we'd like to set up the younger employees to be able to train and get into these positions. If we're having troubles getting new people,
Yeah.
We want to set those up that we have currently for success.
Absolutely. Those are great suggestions as well. And with this succession planning, so now we're engaging a more diverse workforce. Maybe we're opening up positions to offer to the younger workers or the junior level workers so they have an opportunity to move up in the organization. And the interesting part of this, which we'll talk about next month when I come back to do my succession planning presentation, is that the 2 program managers will retire in 2 years. So in the workforce analysis that we produce in our human resources information system, we like to get as much data as possible. So we know how many people are exiting the organization, for what reason, by when. A lot of times with retirements, you have a good end date. With terminations, I mean, if we terminate, we kind of know when they're leaving us. But if they're resigning with us, or for health reasons, they're taking leave of absence, we can only forecast, but we can't really tell exactly when they're leaving us. So in this scenario, we're having up to 2 years to succession plan for the 2 program managers, which is great. It's giving us lots of time to groom at least 2 people or even more within the organization to back up these 2 positions. That's excellent. So I'm just going to write back the first suggestion as well. What will be another suggestion? Please.
Kind of close to the succession planning or whatever, but we were talking about enrichment and
There.
got it. Ours is close to the succession planning, or we could do it at the same time, where we talk about enrichment work and PD planning as well. So yes, you are going to do 2 or 5 people for those managers' positions, but how can we make those other positions better? Because when we were talking about youth, you were talking about challenging work and that sort of thing. So maybe that's one of the causes for people leaving that are younger.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point too. With one particular organization, what I started with the managers is they realized they're too busy. The organization was small when it first started, and it grew really fast, even though it's a nonprofit organization. So managers find themselves busier and busier with day-to-day stuff, whereas their job right now is not a frontline manager as in 5-10 years ago. Their time should be more spent on strategic planning. So the process we have started with that organization is to relook at the job analysis of their positions. Let's track how you're spending your time by hours, by percentage of time. What's costing your most time? What's priority for this position? And what can you delegate? And with those delegations, then we can talk about succession planning. We can talk about grooming, enrichment work for other younger workers or supervisor level. So we can also build a strong mid-level management in the organization as well. So great suggestion. Another one, please.
You could look at your work hours and see, is there a way that you can be flexible? So because you have so many people with children, you have single parents and all of that.
Yeah.
Look at your work hours. Can you change them, be more flexible with them so that people that have children, whatever, can be off after school? Or perhaps it's a single person who would rather work all the night shifts or whatever, but be more flexible and put it out there to people that, you know, you're willing to change these work hours and set up those schedules for people to accommodate their lifestyle into their job. Because if they're happy at work, then they don't have the stresses that they're bringing home that, oh, I have to be home and my kids are at home and I'm at work. Just to make it easier for people to do their job better when they're at work.
That's absolutely right. Flexibility in the workplace and flexible hours. How many of your organizations are offering that right now? Excellent. So what kind of hours are you experiencing? What kind of hours are offering to you?
Longer days, like Monday to Thursday.
Okay.
And then Friday is a day off.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. What about for you ladies?
Routine the hours of 9 and 3.
Okay. So as long as the total hours stays the same, regardless when you come. Okay, that's very good. What about virtual workers who are working remotely? Is that an option too in the workforce?
Yep.
No, some yes, some no, kind of. Yeah, depends on the situation. So the flexible work hours is definitely gaining its popularity, especially with younger people. They want that work-life balance so they can work on other things they're interested in outside of work. I mean, in the old time, the older generations believe that work is very important. Let's stay loyal. Let's stay dedicated. Whenever the boss asks me to be there, I'm going to be there at least 5 minutes earlier. With the younger people, ask me to do what? Overtime? I have a game to play tonight, right? Or I have an event to attend tonight, right? So it's a very different mentality. I know work is part of my life, but it's not the total part of my life. So people see the working hours differently. And I always challenge my clients or organizations in general is, does the business have to be working Mondays through Friday, 9 to 5? Even if that's the case, that there are core hours that we have to serve the public and customers, what can we do to look at flexible options for our workers so we can make it more attractive? And sometimes we may have volunteers to join us, right? Or students joining us. So can we go around those hours? What will be another suggestion? Please.
I would say a strong compensation policy, including a structured salary grid,
Okay.
to where new employees and current employees can see what wage they're going to be at if they perform at a certain level, how they get to the next level.
That's excellent. So with this caring group, they're nonprofits, so budget is always an issue. But even though budget is an issue, it doesn't say we can look at our compensation structure and make sure that it's rewarding and reward the right kind of behaviors, the suitable kind of behaviors, right? So how many of your organizations do have a clear comp structure in place? Less people raising hands. Thank you. That's really good to know. With the compensation structures, right? So we talked about the total compensation. We have the base pay. We have the indirect pay. And we have the incentive pay. So the base pay is your typical base salary, right? By whether it's annually or biweekly, whatever the case may be. The incentive pay will be the commissions, the bonuses, depending on performance. And even with nonprofits, even with typical HR positions, we could still look at rewarding the right kind of behaviors by offering a percentage of our pay into incentive structure. So for example, if at the beginning of the year when we set up our performance review process, we know that in this year that HR team, we're going to implement a system or we're going to recruit however many people. So we can evaluate those results. And if the results are exceeding or meeting the expectations, we could look at offering an incentive system. So an incentive system is not just for sales positions or customer service positions or retail positions. I think that would be the wrong approach. In this day and age, I think we can look at really flexible and creative options of seeing what kind of behaviors do we want to reward in the workplace and what kind of structure can we offer to rewards. Indirect pay will be things we talk about, your benefits packages and retirement options. With the younger workforce, I have to keep saying that they don't realize the benefits, the value of the benefits package and the retirement package they're getting from the workplace. So a lot of times it's a missed opportunity when we present the offer. They only look at this and they think the base pay is all about it. And they look at two offers, they're like, this company A offers me $5 more per hour, I'm going to accept their offer. And I always tell my students that it's really the wrong approach. We should look at the entire total compensation package because benefits, if we purchase on our own, is very expensive. And retirement savings is also very expensive. We know that with retirement, we have 3 tiers here in Canada, which is the government level of retirement savings, your CPP, old age security, other kind of subsidies if you're in a low income category. We have the employer-sponsored pension options. And those could be your RSP matching, could be your defined benefits or defined contributions plans, or the traditional LAPP plans, et cetera, et cetera. And then a good chunk of it comes from the employee's individual savings. So those will be the 3 tiers of our retirement package. And so now people live longer, they die later, they live healthier. So the current retirees are drawing lots of money away from the current CPPs and employer-sponsored plans. I don't know by the time that 20, 30, 40 years pass by when the younger people retire, what's going to be the options for them. So I always advise younger people to look at the total compensation package and start saving early for their retirements, even though it may be 30, 40 years for them down the road. But the earlier you save, the more money you reap the benefits of when you do retire. Right? So yeah, lots of. Would there be another suggestion? What you suggest the caring group do? Please.
Creating a social committee, be able to hold social events.
Social committee. I was waiting for that. Let's have something fun, right? So, and so we have 3 locations, right, for this caring group. So when we do have a social committee, we may have to take into consideration of the different locations. So maybe having 1 or 2 representatives from each location. Can we do an entire organizational thing? If budget doesn't permit, can we do individual office-based, but still the theme is consistent throughout? That's a great suggestion. What else can we do? Yes.
Have a challenge set up between, make groups of 5 or 6 and give them different T-shirts and, have a challenge go out there for the most successful responses from their customers or clients. So the best feedback.
Okay. That's a great point as well. So with the hospitality organization example I talked about today in the presentation, when the general manager received the feedback, so we did send out feedback forms to satisfaction surveys to our customers that we served. And so the one feedback was the employee would not offer me more tap water because he said there was no water available. And the general manager looked at the survey result and he was like, this is not happening. How can there be no tap water? So he looked into the issue and finally found who the supervisor on the shift was and talked to the supervisor, and the supervisor talked to the employee. The employee's rewarding, so the reward structure for that department was set up that the incentive was provided to how many people they serve during a short period of time. It's not about the quality, it's more about the quantity. So we realized that with analysis, that was an issue. So we changed our incentive now to base both quantity is important, don't get me wrong, but also on quality. How can we make our customer engaged? So those were great feedback that we received from the customer firsthand, and we took that seriously and changed our practice in that department. That's a great suggestion. Anything?
Socially too, for this week or something, we'll do groceries to feed the poor, the hungry, or those kind of challenges in the organization. Not necessarily at work or pertaining to their work, but it's kind of gets them out and
social responsibilities. That's excellent. And throughout those processes, the workers get to know each other and may even bring the family members on board. So that's really good. Is there any other suggestions? Yes, just wait for the ball to come.
A lot of it comes down to, especially if they're turning people over very quickly, it's training.
Absolutely, yeah. Diversity training, or sometimes Microsoft will call it a sensitivity training, is becoming more and more popular to becoming mandatory for many organizations. So there are mandates to have this kind of sensitivity training to think about the differences that people have. And even though they may from the same ethnic group, same age, same gender, the same brought up, but they still can have differences, even between twins, right? They can be very different personalities too. So those sensitivity training are really good ways for employees to ask sensitive questions and understanding the differences. Again, it's not about being scared, the fear of differences. It's actually about the similarities and managing workplace expectations. Anything else? Yeah, so and the one thing I had on my list was definitely to make diversity inclusion as part of the strategic plan. Goes back to the first step of the 6 steps that I shared. Does your organization have a vision to include diversity as part of it? What gets measured gets done, right? So if it's part of the senior leaders' mandate as part of the strategic plan, their performance is measured against this, then they take it more seriously. And if they take it more seriously, the managers take it more seriously, the employees take it more seriously, then it became a consistent approach. And that's what I call the multi-level stakeholder engagement when it comes to diversity inclusion. Any other comments about this case? No, okay, that's good. So let me just turn this back on. Okay, I guess I better erase this. Is it a little blurry somehow?
It is.
Yeah.
Just like glasses.
See, diversity and vision.
Is that worse? It is.
Oh, yeah, that's really good. Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's much better. Yay, great. Yeah. Let's celebrate it. Yeah, so all in all, I just want to conclude that diversity is the facts and inclusion is the act. So it's not a good thing to do when we have the money and time and effort. If we're not starting practicing inclusion in the workplace, let's make sure we catch it up really, really quickly. Because it is not just a trend, it's the fact around us. And let's start taking action to include diversity in our workplace and to serve our customers better too. Are there any questions from both this presentation or even the first presentation you may have, or just any comments or any experience, knowledge you'd like to share with us? I am your ears.
This is usually the part where I mention to everybody, remember, this is free. The question that you got at this point in time and asking it, that's what he's here for, right? So if you've got those particular types of questions that you want to ask, and you don't mind asking them in a group setting, now's a good time to kind of ask that type of stuff, as it relates especially around sort of recruitment and onboarding and getting people going with it on site. Because eventually, of course, this all leads towards retention, right? So feel free to take the opportunity and ask the questions.
Thank you for the offering, Chris. Please.
I have a question around. Thank you. I have a question around recruitment. Basically, based on your experiences, how do you separate the bias when you're recruiting internally? Because you've already know the people. When you walk in a room, you know them. How do you separate that?
So it's a good question. Is your policy saying that if there is an internal applicant, we have to interview?
Yeah, not necessarily, no, but we're recruiting internally, and we're just focusing on the internal right now.
Yeah.
And doing external versus internal. Internal is much more difficult.
It is, yeah. So let me just make this very clear. If you have a collective agreement, unfortunately, there are procedures that we have to go by. So first, let's check the CBA, collective bargaining agreement, to make sure that we have everything checked. If there is a non-unionized environment, it's basically how your policies and procedures are set up. So going back to that, why we need to hire and how we need to hire, the thought process. Now we know we're hiring internally. We know the politics and then history about these coworkers behind the scenes. So in order to avoid the HR hiring a recruiter or the hiring manager likes me better than the other person, let's set our criteria prior to going to the selection process. So without seeing who we are collecting, just as we are posting the job, we are setting the criteria. So we know exactly how we're going to evaluate our candidates against. That will be the first thing that I do. So these are criteria we already set up, and we use the same criteria to evaluate against everybody across the board. So it's the consistency part of it. Jeff, I have something to add, please.
Yeah, it's a commercial for the next session. Because we're actually going to talk about how you can apply really, really rigorous competency criteria that makes the decision process on who gets the job internally easy, or at least easier. And it'll also make explaining to the person why they didn't get the job a no-brainer, because you've got actual criteria and scores and everything else based on actual competencies that people require. Takes the emotions right out of it.
Another way that larger and richer organizations have been doing is to have internal employees going through selection center. So those centers are formed by committees of different levels of the employees in the organizations. And it could be anywhere from half a day to a couple of days in a different location. So it could have a test in the morning, and it could have interviews in the afternoon and case studies the next morning, and so on and so forth. It can get really complicated if you want to go that way. The decision is more justifiable because you're using a panel, you're using committee, and you're testing the candidates from all kinds of directions, all aspects. So the decision is a lot more justifiable to avoid people say you don't like me just because of my history here. But the downside of it is the cost, the time, and effort to put everything like that together. It's usually used by larger organizations, as I said. Yeah. So that's another way of looking at it. Always in recruitment, my experience, always have a panel. Panel means equal to or more than 2 people who are recruiting with you at the same time. Because we're all human, we're all biased, right? So we do have our bias. So usually have a panel is a little bit better. And I typically would have my criteria set up right in advance before I even look at the applications, and also have the weight assigned to the criteria, how I'm going to evaluate and what's more important factors. I hope that addressed your question.
Did you say that was the next one in October?
No, coming up in about a half hour. Between now
This
and the end of
afternoon.
the day,
Yeah.
we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Reference checks. What are your thoughts on reference checks?
Can you be a little bit more specific?
So for me, I do 2 reference checks for every new employee, and it must be someone they've reported to in the past. But generally, the reference checks all come back the same. Nobody provides someone that's going to say anything bad about them. Every once in a while, you get a hesitation in someone's voice so that you know maybe they're having an issue at that. They had an issue at that, but sometimes it seems like we're getting the same robotic responses from all the references. So what do you think is good for references? Who to contact? How many?
Yeah. I typically, when I recruit for organizations, I typically ask for at least 2.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times 3 or 4. At least out of the 3 or 4, at least one supervisory, like a direct reporting relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I also would sometimes mandate or ask for how long you've worked with this person, now known this person, how long you've worked with this person, in what capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So before you even ask them to provide me a list of references, I give those criteria out. And I mean, it depends on the position, right? So some people are fresh out of school, they just don't have the experience to provide you with these references. Then we can still look at the situation and ask for different kinds of references.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at recommendation letters. Personally, I just don't like them. I think they are very generic. And they're now customized to the candidates. And also we have to ask ourselves why the references are provided the way they are these days. Some organizations even have policy very clearly laid out. We are not allowed to give references, right? And some employees, when they give out references, they don't want to jeopardize their current working relationship if they're looking for a job while they're working. So they can't use their direct boss. They may use a really close by friend in the workplace to give the reference. If that's the situation, I would say no problem. Once we check your background check, everything is checked off, I'll give you a conditional offer. Now I'm going to call your manager.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so that will be another approach looking at it. Mm-hmm. But also when we do reference checks, I look at the red flags and inconsistencies. So my questions for the references, of course, are standardized because you want to make sure it's consistent. But also I would probe on things that I found a little bit fishy from my interview process. If there are things of concern, I'll definitely probe it to the reference. And those are times that you call reference off guard and they kind of react more authentically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those will be things that I would suggest. Yeah.
I have one more question about regretting candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So do you suggest regretting everyone that applied or just those who were selected for the interview process?
Okay, so 2 parts to the question. If I am using the application tracking system, so some organizations with much budget, they can afford an electronic system. In that situation, the system could send generic email automatically to everybody who have applied. Saves you time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have those systems, so the second part of the question is typically I would reject the ones who have gone for my interviews.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm receiving it in the economy the way it is today, if I'm receiving 2,000 applications, it's not unknown of. So I cannot, working by myself, and send 2,000 emails to everybody saying sorry next time. But at least the ones I interview, I will give them courtesy email.
Mm-hmm.
And usually on my posting, I'm very clear, only those selected for interview will be contacted. So if they're not contacted, they should know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You would hope.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Just a question about the training aspect. We talked about sensitivity training.
Yep.
Is that the new word instead of respect in the workplace training?
Okay, so that's a good question. So the respect in the workplace, let's not get confused with respectful workplace policy training. So more and more organizations now would have the respectful workplace policy in place. No discrimination, no harassment, no bullying, no this and that kind of thing. No personal conflicts, basically, in a way. But the sensitivity training is really about understanding the differences amongst us so we can work more effectively together now as a team. So it's about 2 different things. It's at the end, the results we're hoping to get all of sensitivity training is value coworkers and respect. But those are separated from just respecting workers, no bullying, no harassment, no discrimination. Yeah.
Is there an easy way to sell respect in the workplace to your employees? Because as soon as they see that, they'll go, I'm not going to that session. You know, like how do you sell respect in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's throw it back to the audience. When you sell your training, yeah.
Market.
Yeah,
Market
exactly. Sometimes we make the training mandatory, right? And sometimes we have people to sign up just optional.
Mm-hmm.
When you make an optional, I've seen a number of trainees attending it dramatically decrease. But if the training has really good reputation, then the next session you offer, more people would come. So I want to get everybody's feedback on this. How would you market your sensitivity training? You want it to be? Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Lunch provided?
Lunch provided. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I've also done situations that we make it as part of our team building events. And we make it part of our social event or our Christmas gala or holiday celebration or team milestone achievement celebration. So don't call it just come for a training, because people take training different ways, right? And we're all adults. Having you sit here listening for me babbling whole morning is already tough. I understand. As adults, our attention span is only 25 minutes at a time, right? We have to move to think about something else, stand up, fresh up, go to washroom and stuff, and then come back and refocus. The same thing when your workers and managers hear training mandatory, they're going to be like, I don't want to come, but I have to just to make my name check off on the list. But I have work to do. And guess what they will do in the training? They check on their emails, right? And if the training is really boring, goes back to the skills and content of the training session, it's going to be even worse, making manager feel worse. And then it's going to be harder to sell to market in the future when we put on training. So my way of doing that is to market it differently. It's not a training. We're having an event, we're having a celebration, and let's talk about these things. As people get to know each other, the ice is already broken. Let's talk about what we need to talk about. So again, I come from the millennial generation, so I always like to think about how can we make it fun? How can we make it more engaged and interactive and just different? Yeah.
You spoke about the employee assistance plans.
Yes.
We have one, and it's out there for all of our staff. But how do you get people to use it? Do you have any advice on that? Because they'll come and they'll sit and they'll, share some things, and you direct them along the way because we're HR people, but we're not professionals in everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is why we have an EAP plan.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just can't get people to reach out and use it. You put the card in front of them. Do you need me to call?
Yeah.
And, I don't want to go that far because it's none of my business.
It's privacy. Yeah.
Right? But do you have any advice on that?
That's a good question. So she was asking about the employee family assistance program that we talk about when we talk about suggestions for the caring group. As I mentioned, it's cheap to implement and it's just an additional option. So with the organizations I've worked with or consulted with, most of them would have the EFAP program. The usage is hit and miss. So then again, it goes back to the analysis. Why do employees refuse to use it? Most of it, the feedback I've heard when I do surveys or focus groups, or when you build a relationship, you get to know them, they will open up themselves more to you. They'll tell you why they don't use it. The reason number one I've heard the most is they're afraid of confidentiality or privacy leak. They're like, HR is suggesting the EFAP program for me to use. Are they going to know all my problems in my family now? So that's their number one fear. And then as an HR person, I have implemented one EFAP program for an organization. I have tested that it's so confidential in a way that if you sign up as an employee, if I sign up for EFAP, the first question you call the hotline, they will ask you is, are you committing suicide at this moment? And if your answer is yes, they will have someone speak to you right away dealing with situation. If your answer is no, then they'll be like, let me help you to triage your situation. What kind of questions do you have? And what kind of appointment would you like to book? In person, over phone, over text, computer, whatever works. Even if I bring you in as a person in person, I would not book you back to back with another coworker in the same company, just in case you bump into each other in the hallway. So that's how thoughtful they are in their process. They would not even do that. Another way is that as an HR person, when we receive the report at the end, you would notice we don't see names. We don't see who have used it for what causes. All we see is how many people have used it in the last quarter or last half a year. That's it. That's all we see. And to some point, that employee challenged, I don't believe you. I said, oh, no problem. Let me show you the stat. Let me show you the stats. And then they said, okay, now I know. So that's the number one fear I've heard people now using it is because they're afraid of confidentiality leak, that now HR knows everything about them. And second reason they don't use it is the quality of the service they receive from the EFAP is inconsistent. In that situation, I'll bring those comments back to my EFAP vendor contact person and have a dialogue there. I would also go back to my vendor contact person and ask, how can we do together to promote this in the workplace? I have done promotional sessions, have employees come, talk about a few main themes, issues are common amongst our workforce, and then have the EFAP the contact person be there, help me to promote the session. And then also, a lot of people don't know is what are included in the EFAP program. They think EFAP is all about, I'm having trouble in life. That's why I'm calling, and I feel ashamed because I'm calling a psychologist. No, that's not the case. It's just having a network of support that when we have issues, we have somebody to talk to. And the EFAP counselors, they have to have a master's degree in psychology or social work and 5 years of clinical experience. That's the minimal requirement they have to have in order to be an EFAP counselor. So all of those are good information employees sometimes misunderstood or they don't know. So it goes back to HR's duty. It's our educational efforts not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I push it all the time because I've used it personally.
Yes, yes.
And once you've had an experience of the good that it can do, I can't say enough. But they're paying for it, and it's like, have you called? Have you called? Well, no. I said, do you need me to call? Because I don't know what else to do, and that's I just was wondering if you had any tips.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's helpful having, I think you mentioned earlier, presentation. Having a pre-orientation about what the service is and how it works. Some of my clients in the past have done these things where they have sort of like a health and wellness day, where they bring in all the service providers who deal with all of this type of stuff, so that people can actually meet the organizations and what they provide and what they do. And each one of them kind of gives an orientation about, this is what our service does, this is how it works. So it's very much the stuff that Ada just mentioned, except it's somebody else giving it, not HR, and they tend to take it a little bit more seriously. Like, oh, this won't be as bad as what I thought it was, right? You bring in the medical people, physiotherapy people, whatever it is, right? No,
That's good. That's good advice. Okay.
It's the workplace culture as well, right?
It is. I mean, and the thing is that you're right. It doesn't necessarily have to be a psychologist. Someone that needs advice on financial, or a lawyer, or whatever the case is. Health.
Quit smoking,
health,
for example.
fitness, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because the identification of the problem is there from the employee. They've identified it. We've identified it. But what can we do? We're just trying to give you some tools to help.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but at the end of the day, there's only so much we can push.
Yeah.
Right? It's their life. Yeah. They own it. Yeah. Great question. Yeah.